Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
Oh, we're talking my favorite Robin today.
Oh, Damian Wayne?
I love Dick Grayson.
We're great. Talking about Dick Grayson, and we're talking about some really, really good episodes. We're going to be focusing on Batman, the animated series, season 1 episodes 51 and 52, Robin's Reckoning.
Yeah.
So it was something, and I looked it up, because as I heard the voice, I was like, this sounds...
Oh, I almost texted you. I was so
familiar. The voice of Tony Zuko in this episode?
It's Biff.
Yes. It's
from
Thomas.
Back to the Future.
Yes, Thomas Wilson. Biff. Voice Tony Zuko. I'm like, of course Biff Tannen killed Dick Grayson's parents.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like, of course he did. I heard like 2 sentences out of his mouth and I was like, wait. No.
I know this guy. Yes, I know. It was really funny.
I'm glad you brought that up because I literally wrote a note to myself, do not forget to bring up Biff Tannen.
And he's already had an episode of the podcast too.
It's like when I was young and fully put together Mark Hamill as the Joker, because like you're a little kid, you don't necessarily kind of think about the different things. But when I finally put 2 and 2 together and was like, what?
Yeah, and it's at the point now where, like, it used to be one of those things, whenever I heard Mark Hamill, I thought Star Wars, but Mark Hamill has now ascended to just nerd royalty. And so whenever I hear Mark Hamill, I just see him in everything. I'm just like, he's just amazing. Like, he's on, like, my favorite episode of What We Do in the Shadows. Mark Hamill was the guest star on it, and it was
Wasn't he on an episode
amazing.
of Smallville?
He was, was it Smallville or Flash?
No, it was Flash.
Flash. He was, Trickster? Toyman? It was one of those. I don't know.
He was somebody.
I
don't know who, but he was someone.
He was someone great. Yeah.
See, that's who you want to be. You want to be the person who doesn't have to do all the hard work of developing the character. Just come in for one really fun, like, snippet. One little episode here and there. Or have, like, the super out there character like the Joker where you just get to, go wild. Like, that's the way to do it.
So there was a really funny story. So Mark Hamill had posted a really cool picture of himself on Twitter. It was back in the day, he was young and wearing sunglasses. And I commented on it. I was like, this is a really cool picture. And I think I retweeted it. I said, this is a really cool picture. And he liked the tweet.
Wow.
And I lost it. And I screenshotted that because I was like, oh my God, Mark Hamill just liked my tweet. And then he liked that one as well.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my God, me and Mark Hamill are best friends now.
I mean, naturally.
We're best friends now. He you like 2 tweets of mine. That's practically family at that
I was about to say you're brothers at this point, right?
Absolutely. I am Luke Skywalker's brother. I'm also the Joker's brother.
Yeah, well,
Which
Darth Vader's your father. There's a whole...
Either way, limbs are getting maimed. Whether I'm Joker's brother or...
Oh, yeah. It's a rough life, but...
Family issues regardless.
The likes. Yeah. It's worth it for the likes. Worth it.
Yeah.
That's cool. That is cool.
But this is Robin's story.
This is true.
And Dick Grayson, so this was his origin story in the animated series. It's very, very similar to his origin story in the comics.
Yeah.
And it's always one of the things that always gets me is just how wonderful his family is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the Graysons are such a nice family, and it's the same thing with Batman, though. It's the same thing with him where it's like, oh, the Waynes, they're just the nicest people in the world. It's like, yeah, Thomas Wayne, he owns Gothcorp, whatever, but also he doesn't work there. He wants to work at the
Oh,
hospital and
yes, he's
just
pure
help
of heart.
people, right? Just
Except with what, Telltale, whatever that storyline, and then they
yeah,
turned him
where you
bad.
find out he's just evil. I'm like, oh god, I didn't like
Yeah.
that.
I didn't like that either. I don't think they ever did that to Dick Grayson's family, though. I think they were always a wholesome
And
circus
they're just
family
wholesome
who
family
traveled
that just
together
flipped
and
around happily and hugged. Yeah, they're
catching
just
each other in the air.
yeah. It was wholesome. It was wholesome, and I think that was probably what Bruce really locked in on was
Mm,
how happy they were as a family. And different stories, different like they tell it different ways because sometimes it's like his mom and dad get killed. Other times it's like Dick Grayson has like it's a whole family of flying
yeah,
Graysons, and
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
he
yeah.
has like brothers and
Siblings in
sisters.
there
Yeah,
too.
he has
Yeah,
siblings, and they all get like his family tree just gets chopped down, right?
yeah.
Which is brutal, but it's interesting because every origin story, Bruce just happens to be at the circus that night. And I would like to think that deep down he's looking for the Joker. Like he's like a
Mm,
circus. That's where Joker would be. Cuz otherwise
maybe. Yeah.
he just took a night off from being Batman to go to the circus, which also healthy.
Yeah, okay, okay, that is fair. You need a little bit of self-care.
Yeah.
You need some time off. I agree with you. It's more likely he was working because we all know he's not good at time off. I think in one of the storylines, I think he's there. It's like a charity event, so he's
Yeah.
sporting the Bruce Wayne. You know,
Yeah.
every now and then you got to show your face as
But
your
it
alter
just
ego, but it is unlikely for him, but also a nice change of pace. Of course, people die though. It's
I was
kind
about to
of
say that's what sucks. It's like Bruce is like, you know what? I'm gonna take a night off from being Batman, and I'm gonna do something
death.
fun. I'm gonna go to the circus. Oh, I just watched a child just get orphaned.
Yeah, this feels
Nice,
familiar.
nice. I do. It was interesting to me that when it happened in Batman Forever,
Ah,
he
yes.
was on a date with
Oh, that's what I was
with a
thinking of.
psychologist with
Yeah.
the psychologist. He was on a date with
Yep.
your favorite Dr. Chase Meridian.
Uh-huh. He says facetiously. God, I remember recording that episode.
That was a fun episode. Man, the thirstiest person in Gotham
Oh God,
by far.
so thirsty.
But yeah, like, and so yeah, Batman takes the night off, goes to the circus, and still watches a loving family get murdered. And like, talk about traumatic flashbacks, right? And I know that like Bruce probably has had plenty of these, but I feel like we never really see it. Like we
Mm.
never really see that happen. And even in this, you would think something like that would trigger something emotionally. And I think it
Right.
did because he like reaches out and like, I'm going to take this kid in. I'm going to do everything I can to help. But you never really see him have those kind of flashbacks that shake him to the core and like
Mm.
make him stop. Right. Like I feel like I
I mean,
never
like in
really,
with Chase Meridian, he has some moments where he stops. I think in that one, but yeah, usually not. And I mean, there are a lot of different reactions that people can have to trauma, and so I think a misconception is you go through trauma, you get PTSD, or even you go through trauma. Some people have a trauma reaction that they have issues and therefore they have PTSD. But there's so many different reactions. There are reactions where we're able to process through and get to the other side, and then
right.
there are ones that get us stuck. And some of those lead to PTSD, but that's only some of what might happen. And yeah, I think it's, you know, Bruce actually has I so he's functional. I mean, we
Yes.
we can't argue with that. I mean, he's got a butler, but he's able to
It's the
take care of
belt.
himself. Yeah, yeah.
It's the
He
utility belt. So many
it,
functions.
yeah, he's a very functional person. That doesn't mean he's necessarily a healthy person in how he goes about things. And so you definitely see in Robin's Reckoning how he really connects to this little boy. It makes total sense that he relates to Dick Grayson. He's drawn toward him, wanting to help. And I think they did a good job in this storyline of trying to make it a little bit more wholesome, where it's like, oh
It
no,
was
he's in
very,
danger at the circus.
yeah.
So he's got to go somewhere else, as opposed to like usually you'd be like, so why is Bruce Wayne take it? But
It was
anyway,
very wholesome. Like, because the thing
yeah.
is, the last comic I read about Dick Grayson's origin story was it was when I reread Frank Miller's All-Star Batman and Robin,
Uh,
where Batman just straight up kidnaps a kid, emotionally abuses him into becoming Robin, and
yeah.
then like, yeah, it's so it's pretty
So that
bad.
that's not.
It's pretty
I would
rough.
say that's not the usual storyline, but
It's not, but like
it is hitting on.
but this was
Look,
the most wholesome.
let's be real. It was the most wholesome, and you also see Bruce's gaps pretty quickly, and so you see him connect and relate to this child and want to help, and then he ignores Dick's existence. And that's a pretty common thread, I think, too. And I think a big part of that is he doesn't really know how to hit those feeling parts of himself very well, and therefore he has trouble kind of relating, and I think being able to show why he brought Dick Grayson in. And
Yes.
really the only way he's able to relate is through Batman.
And yeah, well, and it's interesting because there's a really good scene in the episode where he's going out as Batman, and one of the things he's trying to do is catch Tony Zuko.
Yeah.
And Alfred kind of mentions to him, like, this kid, he needs
Yeah.
you right now. And he's like, well, I'm here for him. I'm going out and helping him. And Alfred's kind of like, no, he needs you. He needs you up there. And
Yeah.
I really like that because as a parent, the same thing happens. Like, I'll be caught up in getting stuff for him and
Mm,
making sure the kids are protected, making sure they are being safe, and forget to have fun with them. Forget to just sit
yeah.
down. Like, I I buy them all the Legos they want, but sometimes I just forget to just sit down and play with the Legos with them, right?
Yeah.
Or oh man, let me go outside and make sure there's no sharp sand spurs in the ground for them to step on. But then it's like, okay, now kick the ball around with them too, right? That was my first thought when I saw that, because Bruce was so caught up in, I have to catch this kid's killers. I can't let
Mhm.
what happened to him happen to me. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you've taken this child under your wing. You can't just leave him there. He
Yeah.
needs you. But then it got even more interesting because Bruce goes to the hard overcorrect,
Yep.
because immediately he's like, "Hey, I got us box seats to the football game. What do you say?" And he's just like, "I mean, I guess still got dead parents, but okay." Like, what? Like, and
And so this is the thing, and Dick Grayson in some ways I think is more of a balance, cuz he I mean, you see him with his family, they bond a lot through doing. I
Yeah.
mean, they're doing the circus act together. But he's always a character who's willing to talk about stuff. Bruce is much more of an action-oriented person and a problem-solving kind of person, but it's not always a problem to be solved. It's not always something to act on. Sometimes it's about connecting and relating, and he definitely struggles with how to do that. And it's definitely interesting to see. They kind of show in Robin's Reckoning what the starting point was. You know, you have, so this is a storyline where it's close to the end of when Dick Grayson is Robin. He's probably pretty close to being Nightwing at that point, and Tony Zuko pops up again. And so it's kind of these flashback points, and you see the very start of him and Bruce working together, and then what's going on in the present. And I definitely find, I don't know, I find it very interesting. And I think for me, it stands out the most in terms of Dick Grayson's character.
Yeah.
Um, and just I don't know, he was a very resilient kid. And that's not to say that Bruce wasn't a resilient kid.
Right.
Um, but Dick Grayson ends up with a high emotional intelligence over time, and it gets
Definitely.
tested. It gets tested in this storyline where it's like, what you gonna do when the person who murdered your family is within arm's reach? So he
Definitely.
really gets tested with what he's gonna do with those emotions and things that he feels. But yeah, I think it's, I don't know, it's a bit kind of heart-wrenching because, yes, he connects with Bruce, but he never gets back those kinds of connections he had with his family. I'm
Right.
not saying we'd want that to be replaced, but, I think he has to have the Alfred and the Batgirl and the other people in the Bat family,
Yeah.
in order to honestly get the connections that he needs.
And I think one of the things I do think that's really cool about that though is that it kind of shows how things can change, friends can change, family can change, and it might it more than likely it will not be the same, but the new family you have, the new friends you have, it can still be great, just
Mm.
different, right? They
Oh, yeah,
can
for
they
sure.
can still be a family, but the dynamic, of course, is very, very different. He went from I would say traditional because it's like mom and dad, him, but then there's the traveling circus thing.
A
But
little, yeah, a
yeah, a
little less
little
than
different.
traditional.
There's an elephant in the room, literally.
Oh.
And then but now he's gone to a very different kind of family, but
Well, but it's
they still love each other because and you see it with Batman too, because Batman is like, I couldn't it was so funny because you wanted Bruce to just admit how much he loved Dick,
mm,
but at the end it was kind of like he said he took so much from you. I didn't want him to take you too. When in
yep.
reality, I'm like, Bruce, just say you were scared that he was gonna just say that you were the one that were gonna didn't want him to die, right? Like I don't. It was really funny the way it was worded because I'm like, dude, just hug him, just give him a hug, like
Well,
just
and that's the thing. So it's very interesting because theoretically, this could be a mentor, and in some ways, Bruce is a mentor to Dick,
absolutely
and becomes a guardian and not a replacement for his father, but a father type figure. But pretty quickly, I think it ends up being more of a partnership, and I
right,
think it's more of um more evenly balanced in a lot of ways because Bruce struggles in some areas that you would think of him taking on as the quote unquote parental figure.
Right.
But fortunately for Dick Grayson, he had that high emotional intelligence, and he, I think, had a really good, strong background with his family. And I think he was old enough at that point where he could kind of he was able to, I think, help himself where he needed to. And then of course he had Alfred, which I think was necessary, or things would have looked a lot different.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Bruce really struggles. But at the same time, I mean, there are tons of people where you might say like, uh, when they give you a hard time, that's when you know they love you.
Yeah.
Or we have all these sorts of ways to show that we care and that we're loving. Bruce's are a lot harder to ascertain, but Dick Grayson seems to always be the one who can translate him, who can
Yes.
read beneath, read what's going on underneath it all, when other people tend to struggle.
And another thing that I think has to be pointed out about Dick Grayson is I think part of the way he is, I think the reasoning for that is because of Batman. Like there's that saying that like, oh, you have to learn from your mistakes. No, you can definitely learn from watching other people's
Yeah.
mistakes. And Dick being raised
Mm.
around Bruce and seeing how Bruce is because of not letting go, because of not having a sense of humor, because of not taking it easy once in a while, him seeing that, I think he was able to kind of manifest and correct on
I
things
think that's a great point.
on the fly. I really do think like Bruce was the perfect person to raise him because he basically
Hmm.
saw, hey, this is what ends up happening if you let it completely control you.
That's an interesting point. I see it more of kind of a balance, like Dick Grayson is the perfect child for Bruce to have, and they
Absolutely. They're
have their
perfect.
moments,
Yeah.
but I've never really thought about it the other way around. I definitely see where you're coming from, and I think one of the unique things for them is how relatable their stories are with the loss of their families and how tragic it was. And you, in most storylines, how wholesome or how cared for they were, and then it was all of a sudden very tragically, violently ripped
Snatched
away
away. Right.
by a criminal action. They're around similar ages, although it depends which storyline. But um, there's a lot of similarities, and yet they do have these differences just in who they are. And then I think you have a good point about which is once again why I don't think mentorship or guardian, it's not always clean with them, because yeah, it's almost like brothers in some ways, because it's like, okay, I see what's happening ahead of me, what's happening with this person, and do I really want to take that path myself? And I think it's also why he's able to understand Bruce better,
Mhm.
and is able to empathize with Bruce better, and I think relate to him in a way that others struggle with, because they don't they don't get it. He
They don't.
does.
Yeah.
He gets it. He knows what some of those really brutal past things that have happened, what that does to a person.
Yeah.
And so I think that really makes a difference. Where with others, they think they know, they think they understand because they're knowledgeable about historically what happened to Bruce,
Right.
but they haven't lived it.
And I also think we have to give Alfred some credit here too,
Oh, yeah.
because, as a teacher, if I'm having an issue with getting through to a student or being able to talk with the student about something, so many times I've taught with the parent, right? I've talked with
Mm,
the parent like, "Hey, is there anything going on? What do you think would help them? What do you think would get through to them?" And we see Dick talking to Alfred
yeah.
all the time
All the time.
about Bruce. Alfred raised Bruce. Alfred knows Bruce probably better than anyone on the
It's true.
planet. And so just being able to bounce stuff off of Alfred really does help him approach Bruce in the right way. It helps him
Yeah,
prepare for how Bruce is going to react like so many
true.
times. And on the other side of that, you know, as a teacher, I might do something with my first class and I'm like, okay, what worked well
Yeah.
there, what
Mhm.
didn't work well there. And then when I have a chance to teach that class again, I correct it. This might be one of those things that happened with Alfred. Like maybe I was a little bit too hands off with Bruce. Maybe I need to check in on Dick
Mm.
a little bit more to make sure, like, check in.
But
Hey, how are
also,
you doing?
so let's take that a step further though. Dick Grayson, original Robin. So a lot of new lessons, right? So probably a lot of missteps by Bruce. I mean, we've hit on a few already. And yet also, he was such a natural fit. So the background is the same. Bruce is there for the traumatic situation unfolding. And for goodness sake, the kid already has like acrobatic skills. Like, come
Perfect
on.
resume.
Perfect
Perfect
resume.
resume.
No
Orphan,
one,
wears bright colors,
there you go. It's all
rides
there.
motorcycles. Like he's
N-
ready for it.
No
So,
one, no one can live up.
Indeed profile is lit. Like it's perfect.
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
just
No one can live up to Dick.
no one.
No one can live up to him.
Yeah,
No one can live up to the first Robin.
yeah.
And so I think that's a layer of things too. I mean, he had it really tough and I think because everyone he's put on a pedestal and everyone else is, essentially trying to live up to some of the things about the original Robin, they don't also realize that it's also really hard to be the first. He was
Yes.
the first, people talk all the time about the first kid, they a lot of times get the harshest punishments and the strictest rules and I don't know, I always kid though cuz people are like, "Oh, then the next kid gets whatever." I didn't get whatever,
Yeah.
um
But
but people talk about that all the time.
and it's
Uh
interesting that he's not the one that's the most rough around the edges.
But also, a lot of times, the oldest one, they take on the most responsibility, and
Yeah.
like there are all these different things to being the first one. He probably dealt with a lot of Bruce's learning curves because it's not a natural fit for Bruce. But they both looked out in just how naturally it all came together. That and he was had the perfect resume. You put all that together despite that, he excelled, and who can compete? I mean, you were joking about Damien at the start, but poor Damien, I mean, like, his own actual son's not even gonna compare, and he was trained by assassins, for goodness sake,
I
but
mean, yeah.
still,
Yes.
the background, though, having that shared trauma experience, um, it's they just get each other.
Yeah.
They get each other in a different way, and I think it plays out really well in a lot of different storylines in the
Yeah.
Bat family.
He's the best of Bruce. Um,
Mm,
and I feel like all the other Robins got best of Bruce, but like also some of the worst aspects. Except well,
mm.
Tim Drake, maybe not. Tim Drake is just well, Homeboy's just different anyway. Like he's just his own kind of brilliant. I just want to be Robin, and I'm smart. Like he's just. But we'll get to him later. Well, this
Yeah,
is
we'll
yeah.
have to
We'll
talk
get
about
yeah.
he's not my favorite, probably for all the reasons that you just listed. Well, I guess we should talk about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. We're gonna yeah, they're all the Robins should get their
All the Robins.
should get their just due.
So
They
I would
should.
say so Tim Drake in some ways has it rough because he didn't have it rough. And so he's actually an odd fit. Well, I get I know his dad dies later,
I
doesn't
was
he, or
about to say
something.
that all of their origin stories
But
have something
but
sad about it.
the
Damien is the only one
difference
whose parents are both still alive.
but Tim Drake, his traumatic stuff doesn't happen until after he's Robin, correct?
It depends on the story. I think he's
Yeah.
one of those that actually has like different origin stories depending depending on. I've read like different
Okay.
origin stories
Yeah.
for Tim Drake, but
Because the others more cleanly have a lot of stuff going on
oh
before.
yeah, absolutely,
Where he's more of like a normal but really smart kid.
yeah,
And so that's a very different it's kind of like you got to be a misfit to fit
right,
in that
right,
family. So ironically, that I think makes things tricky for him. Jason Todd, poor Jason Todd, though. I mean, I know this is about Dick Grayson,
yes, this is yes, but
but I,
yeah,
I
Jay,
think
he yeah,
but I think this is an example though. He has a really tough traumatic background, but it doesn't cleanly match Bruce.
mm-mm,
And Bruce is I love him to death. A lot of times not the best of the emotional intelligences, not the best communicator, struggles with things. And so I think he thought that he could relate to the struggle of another kid with a tough background, but I think he really did best with someone where there was a really, really similar background like Dick.
yeah, yeah, definitely, and by the end, it's interesting because Dick works through he works through the emotion the motions of this whole thing because he's
Yeah.
angry at Batman for not like letting him come after Tony Zuko with him. He saves Batman from Tony Zuko. They and has the chance to get his revenge and then doesn't.
Now
He doesn't.
that's yeah.
And I did really like that. And like
Mhm.
and the thing is, I mean, kudos to Bruce too. Joe Chill is locked up in Blackgate.
That's true.
He
Yep.
didn't get his revenge. He didn't begin like yeah, he didn't get his revenge. And so that was but and I think like I said, I think that goes back to like Dick Grayson got like the best parts of Bruce. Like because he sees all of Bruce's faults and he's always there to kind of work on it. And I think part of the reason too is, like you said, he's the very first one. He was the experiment kid, right? Every other Robin that came after that are just trying to live up to him.
Yeah. Well, and sadly, I think Bruce is a slow learner in this one area.
Yes. Yeah. You're so right.
Because he doesn't change much in his approach to his sidekicks
Yeah.
over time. Um you do see some kind of moments like I really like the what is it, Bruce Wayne Fugitive
Hmm.
storyline where he gets like accused of murder and he's and there's really cool stuff with the Bat family and essentially how much does he open up, which is not at all.
Yeah.
How much does he let anyone help him, which is not at all. Um and so there are some cool times where they point things out and he tries to improve and all that stuff, but he's not the quickest of learners about a lot of this stuff. So sadly, even though the others came after Dick Grayson, yeah, it's funny how much they seem to have these similar struggles with certain rigidities of Bruce's because here you see it from the very beginning. You got it in Robin's Reckoning with the first Robin. Like here he is hiding information, not sharing things, which by the way is a terrible way to be a detective. That's that's actually probably his weakest link,
Yeah.
because if you have miscommunication, if you foster distrust, and he did it with Dick Grayson, he does it later on. Dick Grayson, I think in some ways just took it in stride better than some other people, even though he
Yeah.
didn't love it. Um, but uh, he was keeping information from him. And so here is poor Dick Grayson with all of a sudden he's getting flooded with all this information and trying to figure out what do I do with Zuko. And also here's this person who is pretty much all I have now. And they hid this really vital thing from me and tried to take my choice away from me about what I do with this.
Yeah.
But it's heroes in training. And this was I think there are these moments that you see in these storylines when people are becoming heroes, and here he is coming into his own a bit where he's saying, "Hey, I'm actually helping Batman.
Yeah.
Despite being kept out of the loop, I got caught up. I literally saved Batman's life, and I did the hero's choice and I didn't take my revenge.
And
Uh
yeah, even as a kid, when Batman saves him, I just and I love that scene so much. The way it ended when Dick asks Batman like, "Where are we going?" and he just says home
mm.
and takes him back to the Batcave, and then reveals that he's back. I love the way that they did it, and it felt so wholesome. It's like the most wholesome anything will ever get in Gotham. Like it just felt so it was well done, and it wasn't dark, it wasn't gritty, even
Mm.
though it is a dark and gritty show. It's a dark and gritty situation. They it felt lighthearted, and it felt like I just really love how they did that reveal. There wasn't anger, because normally whenever it's something like this, it's almost like a lot of the times Batman would just get really serious and just, will you promise to take up this mantle, and or will you fight this war with me, and all of that. But with this, it was like, how much do you want to revenge for your parents' murder? Because I know exactly how you feel. Like, just uh that level of empathy there is just on another on is it's on it transcends the empathy that was there before, because before the only thing that Dick Grayson knows is, okay, Bruce
Yeah.
Wayne is a rich guy that thinks he knows how I feel because he lost his
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, like, you're a billionaire. Like, no, like, you don't know how I feel. Like, there's certain things that just,
Well,
I
and
get
so
it. You're hurt over your parents, but
I think that that's actually one of the things that can get in people's way when they're trying to support someone else or when
yeah,
they're trying to get supported by somebody is we want to be able to relate to another person. We want to show them that we care and that we understand it, that we can relate. You will you will never have another person who has the exact same experiences as you.
right.
Even an identical twin grown up in the same household. You could even go to the same college and schools and same career, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You will still not have the exact same experiences as another person. And so inevitably there can be those kind of missteps or gaps, or times where it feels like someone's relating and it's just off the mark
Mhm.
because it's just not possible for everything to be the same. But man, especially those things that really hit home and are just very poignant for a person, when you can relate to someone on those deeper levels, it does strengthen that bond and it really can help with that connection. And yeah, just like you were saying, when he when Bruce brings him more into his story and reveals more about himself and what it was like for him and what he did with that, that's and in fact, most of the time in their stories together, that's when Dick starts to embrace Bruce and I think understand him better, and they start to better form those connections, because Bruce is able to kind of break down his own walls enough so that they can actually see how similar they are.
Yeah, yeah, and they really are. I think they are the dynamic duo, right?
There you go. There it
And it's
is.
interesting, yeah, because like you think about what the word dynamic means, and you think that, like, oh, that just means they're great together, they work well together. But dynamic, a lot of the times when you talk about something being dynamic, it's able to be flexible, it's able to
Mm.
kind of work hand in hand and in tandem with something else, and they they balance each other
Oh, 100%.
extremely well. They are the dynamic duo. Like, it just, yeah.
And that's the thing is that Robin, the first Robin, brought all that into reality. So all of a sudden, you have this other person come into play with Batman. And yeah, you're so right that there's that flexibility and dynamic also, it kind of has an energy to it
Yeah.
when you use the word dynamic.
Yeah.
And it always makes me think of the Robin part of things. Especially, I mean, Dick Grayson, he's, making comments and flipping and around and adding fun and flair to things, but
Yeah.
in a professional way. He's got a really good balance, I think, with that. And it's funny because Bruce recognizes it's his style.
Yeah.
So I think, the stern with the playful and how yeah, I dynamic duo is just the perfect description for them.
Yeah.
And I think it really that's what reverberated out from there. And he really, I mean, Bruce came to rely on that relationship. I really do think that just how purely good their connection was,
Mhm.
he started relying on it. And I don't think he would have been as good of a Batman without Robin. And then I think that first experience is what ripples into later on when you have multiple partners that come along, literally because they say Batman needs a Robin. Batman needs a sidekick.
Yes.
It started with Dick.
And I will not lie, and you are just going to eat this up, and I will never I'm not going to live this down, but I think over this conversation, I do believe that Dick Grayson has
Are you gonna
become my
agree with
favorite
it?
Robin between all the
Yes.
digging through all the research and having this conversation and all that, and like between rewatching the episodes and everything, like he really is
He's so
absolutely great.
good.
He's so
And in
good.
the
He is.
comics, I love him too. Like, and he's always when Bruce is struggling, he's the one that shows up.
Yeah.
And he's always just talking, 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 talking because he knows that Bruce needs someone to fill the space and he's not gonna be able to do it himself.
Yeah. He's the best.
Oh,
He's the best Robin. He's the best one.
oh.
I won't say he's the coolest because Red Hood is still very awesome and Jason Todd is just
I mean, yeah, I guess killing
wonderfully
people's more
broken. Yeah.
cool if you wanna.
No, he stopped the killing. That's what made him good. That's
That's
what
true.
made him better.
His outfit's cooler. I'll
Yes.
give you Nightwing's outfit isn't as cool.
Yeah. That brown
I'll give you
leather
that.
jacket though.
And when he did the long hair, like, I was not really into that.
No, I thought it was cool with the long hair. I thought it was kind of cool
Nah.
with the long hair. But
I was
yeah,
like,
he's
"Really? Party in the back? Come on, man."
it was not a mullet. It was no. Don't do him
It
like that.
it was close.
It was not a mullet. No.
It was too
We're
close.
not gonna do him like that. It was no. Stop for a mindful nerd moment. It was not a mullet. Absolutely not. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
I am
no.
just thrilled to bring you over to my side. This is so
Yeah.
exciting.
Like,
I
yeah.
guess the podcast can end now.
Like,
You've
yeah.
admitted that
Oh,
I'm right.
wow. Okay. Well, now I have to take it back. Now I have to take
Oh,
it
no.
back. Only because I want the podcast to continue.
That's fair.
But yeah.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.